shall we start with the trustees hustings? And Caroline, do you want to pitch yourself first as to why you should be a trustee?
Sure. Okay. So I'm Caroline. I'm a third year sociology student at Edinburgh. I actually am really new to NaSTA, so I can't really say much regarding the organization, but I'm a really fast learner and very reliable. So I'm looking forward to hopefully working with all y'all. A little bit about myself. Like I said, I'm a third year student from Edinburgh, but I grew up in Los Angeles. I am the uni social sec for two societies, a marketing society at Edinburgh and the EUTV television society. Professionally, I have worked a bit in TV back home in LA. I've done like some daytime stuff and also some marketing stuff within television back home. And I'm currently doing like a remote internship with a TV show back in LA. So with like the time change and all that. So my time management is like very good, I would say at least. So I guess some other things about me. I was on two boards in secondary school. I was on the Los Angeles Mayor's Council. And then I was also the treasurer and vice president, both in back-to-back years of the Los Angeles Figure Skating Club. So I guess like in terms of qualifications, I think I'm qualified to do this. I would hope I am. And yeah, I don't really know what else you want to like know about me. So questions, comments, concerns.
Does anyone have any questions for Carolyn? It's looking a bit quiet, so I'll pitch one for you. As a trustee, because you'll be partly responsible for approving the budget that the exec proposes, do you have any sort of background in a role similar that potentially involves budgeting?
So I was the treasurer for a figure skating society, like figure skating club in Los Angeles, like the biggest one in Los Angeles. And I worked with so I was like the like under 18s treasurer, and then the over 18s treasurer was like a growing up. So I learned a lot from that experience. And then also like in high school, I worked closely with my school and like their budgeting things for student events and stuff like that. So I have a lot of experience like with numbers and balancing budgets, even though I am a sociology student.
Excellent. Does anybody else have any questions they would like to ask Carolyn? Is it Carolyn or Caroline? Sorry.
Caroline, but Caroline. I'll go by either, so it's fine.
You should have corrected me sooner. I look like a right idiot now.
No, it's okay. It's okay.
Any other questions for Caroline? Okay, what we'll then do is how the trustees work is because there's not a limit on the number of trustees. While we've got multiple people running for trustees, they're each having to be reopen nominations rather than each other because the more trustees, the merrier. So we're next going to have Harris coming up, who's also running to be a trustee, and both of them can become trustees. So you don't need to compare them to each other. You just need to compare them to the option of having nobody and decide whether you think they're better than having nobody. So that's ultimately your decision. Harris, do you want to pitch yourself?
Hi, everyone. Yeah, just a quick clarify how it's working with me. If I were to win the secretary role, which I was saying for earlier, then I will obviously withdraw from trustee because I can't hold both, nor would I need to because as secretary, I'd be in a trustee board anyway, just in case that's a bit of confusion there. I'm not hoping to get both roles. But yeah, I've already talked a bit about who I am and what my kind of influence with NaSTA is, so I won't repeat myself, other than to reiterate that I was one of the 3 key people involved with essentially making NaSTA a legally recognizable charity organization. So effectively I'm legally recognized as the founding trustee, even though obviously NaSTA has existed far before me, but it does give me that obvious insight into governance and how it should roll. So effectively all I'm asking is to be able to continue serving in that capacity if I don't get obviously the secretary role, as one of the trustees, sitting in kind of the trustee board and helping to oversight, assist, and kind of advise on anything which the exec needs us to, or anything which needs a trustee level decision making. I think as one of the people who've written the governance, I'm usually one of the 2 people who are now going to be kind of asked what the intention was of certain materials and if something needs clarifying or correcting it kind of helps to have someone who actually helped write it be able to kind of advise on that. And I've also had a similar kind of position responsibility in other organizations I've been part of, including my own students' union. I've not been a trustee of my own students' union, but I've been on the kind of council and such and helped write up governance for there. And I think also it's important to have diversity within NaSTA. I think it's something that's repeatedly brought up on, and I think if memory serves correctly, I have been the only person of colour on a trustee board since we've had trustee board. So I'd obviously like to help kind of continue being that voice, but obviously also if you vote for Caroline, you'll have two voices there, which is obviously even better. But again, as a person of colour, as a disabled person, and as a working class person, three big massive barriers into the TV industry. It helps to have the National Student TV Association have those voices within its trustee board. So yeah, hopefully I can still be a voice and help serve from NaSTA.
Does anyone have any questions for Harris? Atia?
Yeah, so as you were saying, Harris, obviously you're coming from three underrepresented groups, and is really, really important to have that. But I'm just wondering, do you think that there are any ways to encourage or like open access to other underrepresented groups as well and get more people to run for trustee and more people to run for the exec? Because I mean, it is 2020 and this incoming exec will probably be predominantly white male. So I think that's maybe just a point that we should talk about. And I don't know how much trustees really deal with that, but would you have any kind of thoughts on how you would maybe widen representation and access?
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great point. I mean, as well as also being a voice for diversity, I should also use that voice to actually push forward for more diversity. You're absolutely right. And that's obviously something I will maybe make one of my kind of personal aims if I was to be re-elected, either as secretary or as a normal member trustee, to kind of push forward for. So obviously I can obviously voice my own backgrounds, but there are many kind of identity groups which I will be able to represent, and it's important to have those in a trustee board and in the exec and in the organisation as a whole. So yeah, I would probably be a discussion between me, trustee board, and the exec about how we can sort of push for that. But I think you yourself mentioned a good point about how, you know, attending NaSTA conference as physically is often a barrier to certain members, and I think I've always felt it's a barrier to working class members of Student TV to go to NaSTA conference, because depending on how much their own station can subsidise their transport. For example, my own station, Newcastle, we don't have the funds to subsidise member transport, so our members have to fund themselves to go to the NaSTA conference. And I've had my own members feedback to me, this makes it a barrier for me as a working class student to come across. I've been lucky because I've been on the committee, so I've been able to tap into committee funds to go transport to represent the station. Other members haven't had that assistance, and it's not fair to working class members of my station or working class members of other stations who don't have station funds to do that. That's one example of sort of a barrier which I think is really important to look at. Obviously, finance is difficult for a charitable organisation, especially during COVID, so it's not really as clean cut as I'd like it to be, but that's obviously, if I can't help fix it, the way I'd like to look at it is at least set down the framework so future years have something to build upon rather than, you know, nothing at all being done.
I just had a quick one for the both of you, if I may. In terms of the changes that some of us would like to make for, you know, speaking of the Constitution and that sort of thing, it doesn't have to be a long answer from either of you, but I know, Harris, because you've been there from the start, and you've got, you know, people coming in now saying that changes need to be made, I just want to know from the both of you whether or not you'd be, you know, willing to get on board with the train moving forwards, or if you are keen to, you know, keep things very much the way that they are and work to fix them.
Shall I go first? Or, okay, so I mean, I think change is always good. I don't know much about, like I mentioned earlier, much about NaSTA, but I mean, if it seems like something that the vast majority of people want to do, that's democracy. That's obviously what we're going to try to achieve. So yeah, I would be more than open to any changes people had, and more than willing to try to work towards getting to that place.
Yeah, I realised from that question, it's maybe not immediately obvious to normal affiliates what role trustees play in an organisation. Perhaps that's something In fact, no, that's definitely something the trustee board should sort of address. And I think, after this meeting, I will go forward. I'll actually directly make a point to the trustee board about maybe putting something out. I have actually written a document myself as part of my duties explaining what a trustee's role actually is, but that hasn't, I don't think, been made available yet. So I will actually, as soon as we finish the meeting, perhaps propose that so people actually know what role we play. But in terms of the context of Joe's question, I see the trustee board as facilitating the wishes and the changes of the affiliates, because the organization is here ultimately for the affiliates, and they should have the biggest voice in where the organization goes and doesn't go. So it's not for me, the trustee, to block any changes the affiliates make, unless it's something severely damaging or something which might legally compromise us. And that's where our role ultimately lies, is the legal representation of the organization. So whatever changes the exec want to do or the affiliates want to do, as long as it doesn't, legally cause issues, it's our job to kind of help with that, assist that, and make sure it's done in the most democratic way possible, ultimately, more than really making changes and waves ourselves.